Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Angle's prelims for 2019. We're delighted to have a number of esteemed analysts in the FTI Consulting headquarters in London, and we're extremely pleased to have all of you on the webcast that are joining us. So thank you very much for coming along. This has actually been a pivotal year, the year to 30th of April 2019, and we're poised for a number of major developments and commercialization of our Parsortix system. So I'm very much looking forward to taking you through the progress that we've had this year. So just to reiterate, Angle is absolutely focused on one area, and that is transforming cancer care by driving a revolution in personalized cancer care. And the way we're doing that is that we have a proprietary patented technology, and that can drive liquid biopsy by harvesting cancer cells from patient for analysis. Now, the circulating tumour cells, these cancer cells in the patient blood, they have been known about for over 100 years, but it's only now that Angle is bringing Parsortix system to the market that can easily retrieve and access these cells for analysis. So that's why we believe we're actually transforming the treatment of cancer. And we're doing that with a very simple, effective and affordable solution. It offers the best performance in the market, it's the easy system to use, and it's lower cost than the competition. So we're in a very strong position. All of those of you who are in the invested in Angle stock already know that. So the question is, what have we been doing to achieve that? This year has been a year of very strong progress against all of the company's 5 key milestones. We've been working with a wide range of world-leading cancer centres to bring this technology to market as quickly as possible. So the 5 things that we've achieved during this year. Firstly, we've had positive results from our 400-subject metastatic breast cancer FDA clinical study. And this gives us the opportunity to be the first ever liquid biopsy solution to harvest cancer cells for analysis. Secondly, we have successfully completed the integration of the business we acquired in November 2017, a company by the name of Exela, which has a superb molecular analysis platform called High-Seed Ziplex. We've been through an extensive optimization period and we've integrated that technology. So now we have a best-in-class circulating tumour cell capture and harvesting technology and a high-performance molecular analysis system for analysing the cells once we get them out. Thirdly, we've had strong progress in our pelvic mass triage ovarian cancer test. This is our exemplar because it's extremely difficult to detect the presence of ovarian cancer. And we have already completed 2 studies showing that we can outperform all other approaches on the marketplace. And during this year, we completed the pre-study phase of a clinical verification study which is designed to bring this ovarian cancer test to market. Fourthly, we've progressed our corporate partnership arrangements with Abbott, QIAGEN and Philips, and we will be focusing on achieving not only progress with those corporate partnerships, but actually delivering some new ones as well in the coming year. We're focused also on growing the body of published evidence to support our system. It's absolutely crucial with a medical product that you have the third parties, the top cancer centres, actually using it and getting good results. And our leveraged R&D model is delivering. We'll talk about how that is working shortly. In terms of our financial results, we continue to have establishment revenues in research use areas. Those revenues were up 25%. They're just the tip of the iceberg though. The purpose of those revenues is to put this system in the hands of the leading researchers in the world so that they can develop new applications for us. And they have succeeded in doing that during our year. The gross margin of this product continues to be high, and as you see, it's ticked up to 77% from 73% before. Notice we refer there to revenue and grant income of 0.9 million. The grant income relates to the work that we've done with the Philips consortium, which is funded by the European Union. So it really is work with the Parsortix system. It's just paid for by a European Union grant. Now, of course, at this stage of our development, the most important thing is having a strong balance sheet and the cash to deliver the promise of this system. We ended the year with £11 million in the bank on the 30th of April, and since then we've raised a further £18 million gross funding. We had very strong support for our recent placing. It was significantly oversubscribed. All the new investors had to be scaled back. We completed it without any discount to the placing, which was quite an achievement in the current market. And importantly, we achieved our objective of attracting in major US investor interest in the company. Around half of the placing was covered by US investors. And there's a strong base of US investors who do follow Angle now and want to get involved. This is all part of the overall plan to maximize value for our shareholders over time. In terms of the body of evidence, you can see here that we've got a ramping up of the usage of the system. We have 200 Parsortix systems installed, including those in our own laboratories. The number of blood separations undertaken during the period was 24,000, so 24,000 individual samples processed through Parsortix, giving us a cumulative to date of 73,000. You can see that there's ramping up of the usage of our system, and that's corresponding across to an increased number in our peer-reviewed publications. So this is top-notch scientific publications written by independent cancer centres regarding work that they've done with our Parsortix system, which they could not have done without our Parsortix system. And as you can see, the number of publications doubled during the year, so we had 10 peer-reviewed publications. The reason that is ramping is it takes quite a long time for these works to be undertaken. So the seminal work that was done by University of Basel in Switzerland on circulating tumour cell clusters, which appeared there, as you can see the image there, on the front cover of the prestigious Cell publication, that took them 3 years of work to undertake. So we expect to see a continuing ramping of these publications as more and more centres manage to complete work and publish it. And we've now been on the front of Cell, as mentioned, and we were also in Nature, and we've been in multiple international journals. So we're very, very pleased with the way that that's working, because it's increasing the interest and the belief in our system that can make a big difference. And in terms of the access to the market, it's pretty much understood now and accepted by all the clinicians that liquid biopsy is coming. The reason it's coming is because you can only do one tissue biopsy in the course of a patient's disease. Once you've cut the cancer out, you can't cut it out a second time. Obviously, you could do a repeat tissue biopsy once it's become metastatic and spread to another organ, but by that time, it's getting late. So you want a way to do a liquid biopsy. The rest of the market is focused on components that come from plasma. Plasma is the straw-coloured liquid in the blood. The reason they're focused on that is because they don't have a Parsortix. They don't have the ability to get hold of the individual cancer cells. So instead, they're getting fragments of dead cancer cells or other little byproducts such as free-floating proteins, which come as byproducts of the disease. Unfortunately, these analytes are not specific, so they can only provide an incomplete picture. They cannot provide information on RNA and protein expression. They can provide a partial DNA position, but equally, it's not from the actual cells themselves, and that's why a lot of alternative liquid biopsy approaches have a major problem with false positives. They're not measuring the actual analyte, the actual biological spread of the cancer, which is what Angle's doing. We're getting the actual cancer cell that causes the spread of the cancer, and 90% of the people who die of cancer die from the metastatic spread, these cancer cells in the bloodstream. So that's why focusing on the circulating tumour cell area is extremely important and adds a major advantage to the users. It's just we have the unique technology which is able to get hold of these cells and allow them to be analysed. That's a massive advantage for Angle. Now we've added in there also circulating tumour cell clusters and circulating tumour cell cultures, both of which you can do with Parsortix but not with any of these other techniques. And the reason that they're becoming important is because new research is showing that it's not just the individual cancer cells in a patient's blood that's making the difference. It's clusters and clumps of individual cells all acting together in concert. And our system has been shown to be extremely good at getting hold of those cells. Again, it's not possible to do that with the plasma analysis. Now, just a quick footnote there. We don't have to go head-to-head with the competition in circulating tumour DNA or exosomes or anything else, because they take their product out of the plasma. We can quite easily remove the plasma from the blood and enable them to do that. And the very same blood sample can go through Parsortix to do circulating tumour cells. So it's not either or, it's and. So we can get every single one of those parties who do ctDNA analysis to also do CTCs from the same blood. In terms of the new work coming through, possibly the most exciting work during the year was the work that was presented by University of Basel and then further work by Houston Methodist on circulating tumour cell clusters. These have not been widely studied, and the reason is there hasn't been a good system for getting hold of them. It's pretty much by chance, but our microfluidic device is actually extremely good at getting hold of circulating tumour cell clusters, groups of cells, and it gets them out in a way that doesn't damage the underlying cells so they can be investigated. And following 3 years' work, the University of Basel has discovered that these circulating tumour cell clusters are, in a mouse model, 80 times more likely to cause the spread of cancer. And they also discovered that there are certain drugs already cleared by the FDA that have the ability to dissociate those clusters and reduce the metastatic spread. So they can convert the work that they've done in mouse model into human patient studies, which they're currently working on now. Then there's the prospect of reducing the spread of cancer. And remember, 90% of people die of the spread of their cancer. So this could be a major change in how you treat cancer. And from Angle's shareholder point of view, the crucial thing is they have to do a routine Parsortix test first to determine whether or not these clusters are there and how to attack them. And furthermore, the Houston Methodist work built on top of that, it's actually completely separate work, but it builds on the knowledge of circulating tumour cells, clusters. And what they found is that some of these clusters co-opt the body's own immune cells to join the cluster, and in that way they can avoid the body's immune system. So if you could find a way to stop that happening, that might also be a way to stop the spread of cancer. So from an Angle point of view, this is a key new area of research that's coming through. We have a uniquely qualified system for getting hold of the circulating tumour cell clusters to enable that investigation. And hopefully there's a potential for routine clinical use as well in reducing the spread of cancer. So as you all know, absolute top priority for Angle is to get FDA clearance. So FDA is the Food and Drug Administration, which is the regulatory clearance procedures in the United States for new diagnostics. We've been working now for a sustained period of time, well over 3 years, towards getting an FDA clearance. Now, this is a substantial challenge because nobody else has ever achieved it. We're going down a de novo process, which means that there are no predicates to compare us with. It means that the FDA are being challenged with themselves with new questions that they want to get answered about this kind of technology, and we're having to address those questions. So it's been a major effort for us. And so we're absolutely delighted that we've completed the clinical study led by MD Anderson, and we've been able to announce at the end of May positive results from that study, showing that we can get cancer cells out from metastatic breast cancer patients in a significant proportion of those patients, and that when we've got those cells out, they can be analysed with various routine techniques, which will give extremely useful information for the treatment of the cancer. We're now in the process of conducting analytical studies. So these are studies undertaken in our laboratories and some of them undertaken in the third-party cancer centre laboratories, looking at the precision and reproducibility of the instrumentation, amongst other things. That work is very much in full swing at the moment. We've had some very good results coming through, and we remain on track, as previously advised, to complete that work so we can make a submission to the FDA in early Q4 of this year. And what that means then is that we have a prospect of being the first ever company with an FDA clearance for a product that can harvest cancer cells from the blood of cancer patients for subsequent analysis. Obviously, in the first instance, this is focused on metastatic breast cancer, and in due course we would look to run additional studies and extend it into all solid tumour types. That will give us a first mover advantage, which will be second to none. The prospect of FDA clearance is in early calendar year 2020, so hopefully early next year we'll be seeking to hear back from the FDA. And that clearance will give us a huge validation because it will enable us to sell this product for clinical use for breast cancer in the United States direct to hospitals. It will also cover Europe because we've designed these studies to meet the European requirements for CE mark. Furthermore, it will, we believe, turbocharge our pharma services business in drug trials, which is really awaiting this kind of clearance. And it's an important step in attracting the large corporates to negotiate access to our technology. The clinical side of that market is worth $2.4 billion per annum. That's the market that Angle will be able to address. In terms of the commercialization here, we're working extensively with Abbott. One of the key things that's done with a tissue biopsy in breast cancer, a standard of care, is to test the expression of a protein called HER2 in the cancer cells. And if that protein is overexpressed, the patient is said to be HER2 positive, and then she can receive Herceptin, which is a drug that targets HER2 positive cancers. If she has a HER2 negative result, she will not be given Herceptin. So that market alone, the tissue biopsy analysis of HER2, is worth roughly $0.5 billion, $500 million per year. And Abbott is the largest player in that market. So we've engaged with Abbott and said, hey, everybody knows you'd like to do repeat tests in HER2, but you can't do it because you can't access the sample. Once the woman's had a lumpectomy or a mastectomy, there is no tissue to do a solid tissue biopsy on until such time as it's spread to another organ. So if you could get cancer cells out of the blood and analyze them, you could do repeats and you could test whether the HER2 status remains the same. They're very interested in that because that means that they may do 4 times as many tests as they currently do for their existing tests. They don't have to make a new test. We've used their existing fish probes inside our FDA study, and we've shown that we can get the cancer cells out and we can test them with Abbott's fish probes for HER2. Very interestingly, our negotiations with Abbott have progressed quite nicely, and they have said to us that actually what they think they can do is two additional things that we hadn't particularly focused on. The first one is that they are a Me Too player in the current tissue market for HER2 because there are other providers for HER2 analysis. They want to be the exclusive player in the liquid biopsy. So they would like an exclusive deal with Angle in order to be the only company that can access that market. Obviously that means that they can get a larger market share of the available tests. But the second bit is even more exciting, which is that they believe they can get a much higher reimbursement code. Because at the moment, the only way you can do another HER2 test is wait until there's a metastatic spread and then have surgical intervention to the patient to cut out part of her liver or whatever organ it is that the cancer has spread to and use that for analysis. And that has a lot of costs associated with it. So if you combine Parsortix with Abbott's Parsortix, we can provide a simple solution which is based on a blood test. And if you take into account the surgical costs and also the fish test analysis costs, we can get a much higher price for a blood test because it reduces down the overall cost to the insurance companies. So that's the strategy which they're focused on, is how to get a much higher reimbursement codes with much bigger margins and a much larger volume. So we're excited about that, and we're progressing these negotiations with Abbott in parallel with progressing our FDA clearance requirements. As you know, the ovarian cancer area is the company's other major area of focus. There are two reasons for that. One is it's an extremely interesting and exciting market worth over $1 billion a year. Obviously, it would be game-changing for Angle to get control over that market. The second thing is it's an exemplar. It's extremely difficult to detect ovarian cancer. In fact, it's fair to say there is no test that's capable of doing that because it's too challenging. And as an exemplar of what we can do, it will really open up the eyes of our big corporate potential partners as to other things they could do. For example, lung cancer, glioblastoma, colorectal cancer, etc. So we've had a lot of success in this already. We completed 200 patient studies for the intended use population. And the best one demonstrated an area under the curve of accuracy in excess of 95%. As I mentioned earlier, the advantage is we're focused on actual cancer cells in the bloodstream, so the analyte is specific. We have far lower false positives than any other competing test on the marketplace. So we're taking that to market ourselves at the moment. We have a clinical verification study in progress. We've completed the pre-study phase of that and we announced positive results. University of Rochester Wilmot Cancer Centre is driving that for us. And we're targeting the completion of the major study by the end of Q1. That's been designed so that we can then start to offer tests from a clinical laboratory as a laboratory developed test. And as I mentioned, it's a very large market opportunity. So overall, we believe that our commercial pathway is going to open up post FDA clearance. We're going to see multiple different things happening. The first one is the existing research use market. At the moment, our technology is used really by what you could call early adopters, top-level translational cancer researchers who have the skills and capability to develop protocols to take the cancer cells out of Parsortix and then do various things with them. But that's a challenging area and it's pretty much limited to early adopters. We're using some of the investment funds that we've just raised to set up more sample-to-answer product solutions, including sample-to-answer imaging. And the reason is we can then go to the next level, a much wider research use market, where people want plug and play, put the blood in, hit the button, and then they will end up with images of cells which are stained to give them key information. None of the work needed to set up all the individual protocols in their laboratory. So we see that as expanding the existing market significantly. The FDA clearance should open up the pharmaceutical services market, which is a very large-scale research use market for developing new cancer drugs. And those big pharma really are waiting to see our FDA clearance. It means a lot to them because it means they've got the gold standard system being used in their trials. And if they want a companion diagnostic, they've already got a cleared platform on which to place it. So we expect to see expansion in that area. We also expect to see the major clinical laboratories setting up laboratory developed tests using our platform post FDA clearance. And importantly, we have recently taken the decision and we've raised funding for Angle to set up its own clinical laboratory. So we will have an accredited clinical laboratory owned by Angle which can offer tests. The great thing about this is it's going to help us accelerate the process to market. It's not in place of the product strategy, it's a stepping stone towards it. So it will remain small and highly focused, but it does mean that whenever we have a new test that we want to develop, so long as we've validated it according to the clinical CLIA lab regulatory process, then we can offer that test. We don't have to take every single thing through FDA before we start offering it. And it means we can go straight away to get the reimbursement codes, the payer relationships, etc., and short circuit some of the steps to get faster and quicker commercialization. It's also the case that the pharma companies are interested in processing, in some cases, processing samples in a CLIA approved laboratory. So it will give us that capability. And of course, the ultimate aim, clinical products, selling our Parsortix system to hospitals around the world, will be able to start doing that with FDA clearance for certain specific breast cancer activities. So the FDA clearance, we believe, will substantially turbocharge the Angle business right across the board. So to sum up, we've got some very strong news flow coming through in the next 12 months. So we've got the FDA submission due early Q4. We've got prospective FDA clearance early next year. Ovarian cancer results by the end of Q1 next year. We're working on additional corporate partnership deals and progressing milestones with the ones that we've already got. There's no question we're going to see a lot of customer peer-reviewed publications and posters coming through. Crucially, we're going to have product development. So we've got funding for these new sample-to-answer imaging that I was mentioning earlier. We've also got a new Parsortix instrument. We're calling it 1.5 because it's basically the same as the last one, but it's faster, it's quicker, and it meets a number of key issues to improve performance. So we're really pleased with that. And we're also setting up a service laboratory, as I mentioned, a CLIA lab, and building a pharma services business. So there's a lot of things that we expect to happen over the next period of time. And that puts us in a very enviable position where none of our competitors can sit. We have a highly differentiated solution for a multi-billion-dollar market that's coming through, with the prospect of being the first and only FDA clearance in this space. We have the opportunity to complete our ovarian cancer verification study and be able to start selling that very, very soon. We've got a clear growth plan through sample to answer, so making it absolutely idiot-proof to use our system. You just put blood on it and you get results out. And we've got a very, very strong commercialization process, which is built around partnerships with very large-scale companies. And just to dwell on that for a second, why would a large-scale company want to waste time with a small little British company? Answer is we can build their markets for them. We can let them take their products, which they have in tissue biopsy, and multiply their revenues by 4. Why wouldn't you want that? So thank you very much indeed. We'll happily take some questions. And I'll ask Ian to answer the first question. So we hear another voice.
What the question is. Who would like to go first?
Hi there, it's Charles Weston from RBC. A couple of questions on the ovarian cancer side. First of all, what will the cost be of setting up a CLIA lab? And in addition, what costs are you assuming for the scale-up and development of sales and marketing? And also on ovarian, how do you think that the reimbursement landscape will sort of shape up? How long will it take you to get reimbursement from public and private payers? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the setting up the CLIA lab, we estimate it will take be up to sort of just over £2 million to set that up, and that's to start off as a service lab and then develop into a full-blown CLIA lab. There's a time phase to do that. We've got a sort of a 6-month planning. Then we'll, and that includes determining the precise location and where we're going to offer the service from. There's various equipment, but most of that is fairly standard, and obviously we've got our own high-speed Ziplex process and our own Parsortix instrument, so it's adding in standard PCR and next-generation sequencing and various other imaging systems and so forth, so that we've got all the kit in place. There's a period to, obviously, within that, to recruit and train up people, and then we start building the tests out from that. And whilst that's going on, so I said service lab initially, and that's because we'll also have a process and time that we've got to go through to get the relevant clearances for the CLIA certification. So,
what's the annual cost?
The annual cost, it all depends how fast it scales. At the moment, it's based on a fairly low-level resource of 5 people, with some outsourced people coming in, such as medical directors, but it's technicians, it's senior scientists, and it's obviously there's quality people. Those are the core components that are required. So actually the ongoing cost is more of, depending on exactly where we locate it, so it's probably more of the $500,000 to $750,000. Places like California, obviously a bit more expensive than some other locations. So that's why there's some variability in the cost, because we've got to finally determine the optimal location for us, and there's probably half a dozen contenders on where are the best locations, from access to other staff to get set up and operational easily, to other locations are closer to large pharma. So the precise costs are slightly variable on the annual running cost because of that. In terms of the sales and marketing scale up, is this for the company as a whole or in relation to the service lab, CLIA lab?
I was more thinking with ovarian specifically.
Okay, ovarian specifically. So as we said, what we're planning to do is offer that test initially for our own lab, our own CLIA lab. So there will be some sales and marketing, a dedicated person going around that, but we're also looking to leverage some of the large healthcare companies in terms of their sales and marketing and distribution. So what that would mean is that we'd have less costs on the sales and marketing, but obviously there'll be a distributor rights and an associated fee on that, which is sort of maybe 30 to 40% of the overall test value that is distributed to them.
Maybe I can add to that. So what we envisage is that initially there may be sales to private payers, so people who are paying for the test themselves. And those people can be approached via patient advocate groups or via social media. In the longer term, exactly as you said, we need to get to the reimbursement codes, and we need to get set up with the payers. There already is a reimbursement code of $897 for the exact same test. Now, our test, as I say, we expect it to outperform the existing test, and therefore we would propose to go and see the payers and get at least that level for our test. that does take a bit of time to put it in place. And in the meantime, there are some large-scale clinical laboratories that I think once this is proven out may want to take it on themselves, and they have strong sales and marketing in place already.
But what I would say is that in the US at the moment, reimbursement does take quite a bit of time and a considerable amount of effort to get through the full process. Hence why we target private payers in the first instance, and also working with partners to go fully through that process.
Thank you.
Hi, Mick Cooper from Trinity Delta. A few questions. First, with the ovarian, you talked about going down the laboratory-based developed test route. Are you going to then go on to file with the FDA to expand the label, all being well, so that long-term you get a broad cancer label for Parsortix? Secondly, could you give us an update on your European plans? And finally, obviously you talk about exclusivity with Abbott. Obviously, with that, there's an offset that you could do a broad deal across everywhere. Is this going to set a precedent that you're going to not have Parsortix available to everybody?
Yeah, you start and then I'll dive in.
In terms of the LDT for ovarian, so the ovarian cancer assay combines both Parsortix and our high-seed Ziplex. At the moment, high-seed Ziplex is not FDA cleared and we haven't got that in the process, so we will have to go through that before we can get an FDA clearance for the combined test. Eventually we will do that, but I don't see that initially. Initially it's going to be an LDT probably from our own lab, and then it will be an LDT from some of the very large-scale central laboratories. But later on, yes, I would expect to expand that. In terms of the exclusivity, you can do the second one if that's okay. In terms of the exclusivity with Abbott, first of all, we have not granted them any exclusivity. They've just asked for it, so it would be a matter of negotiation as to whether that made sense. And secondly, if we do that, we're talking about limiting it to FISH analysis, not any number of other analyses. So it will be very specific clinical applications. So it won't preclude us, and unless they offered an enormous amount of money, it would not preclude us from doing other things in all the other different cancer types and all the other different applications, which we want to do partnerships with other people.
Yeah, and in terms of the EU plans, was that again in relation to ovarian cancer or generally? Yeah, so at the moment, as Andrew mentioned, the FDA is deemed to be the gold standard, and hence that's why our focus on the US. But studies have been designed to produce data that we can put through into the CE mark approach. I mean, we'll have to see exactly what happens in terms of the regulatory environment, maybe 1st of November or slightly afterwards. We'll see what happens with Brexit, but let's assume it's still under the CE mark and equivalent, and so there's no difference. That's already going through changes, as you may be aware, the new ISO to deal with sort of prior issues. So it's actually becoming more like the FDA anyway. So the data will be sufficient. So off the ovarian, we'll be able to offer a similar lab-developed test. In the initial circumstances, it will probably be blood drawn in Europe and shipped to the lab in North America. And that's why some of the work that we talked about in terms of optimization and ability to process samples for a significant amount of time is crucial, because it allows us to ship the blood to that central resource. But equally, you know, we would work on the basis that other labs will want to offer this test as well. And we know there's various labs in various locations who have got a pressing need. And obviously, one of our ovarian cancer studies was with Medical University of Vienna, a number of German hospitals and so forth. And so we've still got ongoing discussions with them. So we would seek to leverage the associated labs that these people have to push out that. And then obviously on the back of the breast cancer work, I think that will give us the credibility. And you've seen, really, if you look at a lot of the publications, that at the moment is more European-centric in terms of a lot of, from Germany and Austria, Basel, there's a lot of institutions there. So we think we've got a good credibility, and we can support a lot of that from our existing Guildford-based operations. But as I said, in terms of actual clinical samples and processing, we'd be shipping those to North America as our plan. Obviously, further down the line, we'd look to establish other labs in Europe. But first of all, we've got to build the volume, build the tests, and build the service offering.
Mike Mitchell, Palmyra Gordon. How should we think about OPEX going forward? Presumably, as the FDA clearances come into play and the collaborations and the expansion of these sort of industrial partnerships sort of come into play, then that should reduce significantly, or is it double digits?
Clearly we're in the heavy lifting phase, and we have been last year as well, particularly in relation to the FDA studies, both the clinical aspect, which is where we're using the 4 leading cancer centres to do the work, and that's patient enrolment as well as core lab analysis work. And obviously we're doing a lot of the in-house analytical work, and obviously there's all the kit to set those studies up. So those costs will reduce as we complete those studies, but we'll have plans to bring in other related work. So the way I think about it is in terms of the sort of in-house costs, we'll be recycling the people in terms of what they'll be doing. So there's multiple R&D programs going on. So that won't reduce as such. Where it's got scope to reduce is around some of the specific clinical study aspects where we're bringing other partners. But if you look at the fundraise and the additional activities that we've added, actually we're increasing the burn because we're bringing in a service lab, we're doing significant product development, and we're also looking at remission monitoring study. So actually the plans are to increase the OPEX, albeit within that sort of that similar band, but that's because although some costs are reducing, we're also increasing other costs. And the fundraise was designed to take us out to mid-2021, and obviously we had 11 million at the reporting date, 30th of April, raised 80 million, 16.9 gross. Obviously we've got other income and R&D tax credits coming in, but that's the sort of feeling in terms of the burn and what we're planning to do. So slightly higher, but not massively different.
Thank you. Mark Brewer from ThinkCap. 2 questions, please. I was wondering if you had any update on the progress at Basel with respect to the CTC cluster work. At the time of the publication, they talked about applying for a regulatory clearance to start a study. I was just wondering if you had any update on that. And secondly, with regards to QIAGEN, do you have any update on the work that the 2 of you are doing in prostate cancer with
So with Basel, obviously there's the research side of it and the research income that we've generated and the opportunities to expand it in the circulating tumour cell clusters more widely. The thing that would be absolutely tremendous impact would be if they could actually get these cluster dissociating drugs to be proved in humans. And the idea would be that a patient's got cancer, they have a Parsortix test. If there's the presence of circulating tumour cell clusters, then they would take what is actually a cardiac drug, and this drug would be used to dissociate the clusters into individual cells. It wouldn't have the toxicity of chemotherapy because it's not trying to kill the cells, but it would then reduce the spread. And they showed in mice that it succeeded in reducing the cancer spread by a factor of 80. So that's what's out there. An Angle has told Basel we're keen to support them, in achieving that, because obviously the tremendous commercial benefits for the company. 2 things are happening at the moment. One is that Basel have lodged some patent submissions, and we've been looking at those, and we've asked, and we've commissioned, Angle's commissioned some international search opinions to determine how strong those are. If we think they are strong, then we might try and get involved in some of the commercialization there. The second part, Basel is doing on its own, which is it's running a breast cancer patient study to try out these cluster dissociating drugs in some small patient cohorts, and if that's successful, then obviously it's in the interest of our company to try and help them do larger scale trials so that people would want to adopt Parsortix in that fashion. So there's an active dialogue. but it does take, it's like all these things, it takes quite a long time, but it is happening behind the scenes. The second question was about QIAGEN. So QIAGEN, we've been collaborating with QIAGEN in prostate cancer, particularly looking at something called ARV7, antigen receptor variant 7, which is relevant to which drug a patient should have in prostate cancer. There's been a number of issues to do with the model used to test such an approach. And suffice it to say, Angle is taking in-house some of the activities to make sure that we get them done at a very successful level, and it will play right into our sample to answer imaging. So at the moment, we're probably in a sort of steady patch with QIAGEN. There's nothing majorly happening right at the moment, but we have got plans to get that energized and turn it into something strongly commercial. They're definitely a company that's worth dealing with. They've got some very good and widely used downstream techniques which can benefit from getting circulating tumour cells. If you remember, they previously purchased a CTC system, a different competing one, and they realised that actually our system has a number of advantages, so that's why they're engaged with us. So they do see the point of CTCs. So that's I would say that's ongoing work at the moment.
Yeah, I'd probably just add to that. Parsortix element's working. It's making the two interfaces and everything deliver at a very, very high standard. And we know, there's always challenges on that. I mean, we found the same with the high-seed Tiflex, and we put a lot of effort into integrating the systems. And this is one, it can be solved. It just needs a bit of work to bottom it out.
Can I just clarify for my own thinking? You're doing this work for the laboratory, the tests, the applications. Is that predominantly for the commercial benefits that you would get from it, money itself, or to ease the process of getting these products for other players to use?
Are you talking about us setting up our own clinical laboratory?
Yeah.
It's actually both. So as we've seen from our own FDA clearance, the regulatory process to get a product to market is very long. And then after that, there's a need to go and get reimbursement codes and arrangements with payers, and eventually to get in the National Cancer Guidelines. When you see extremely strong ramping of revenues from companies that have actually got into the cancer guidelines, because then in the United States, the doctor's default is they have to do the test. They have to come up with a reason not to do the test, whereas until you're in the guidelines, it's pretty much the opposite. They have to think of a reason why they want to do the test. So there's all those processes, and if we have our own small clinical laboratory, and I'd emphasize at the moment it's small, and unless we start making a lot of money out of it, we won't make it a very big thing. So it's not an enormous amount of investment. As Ian said, we'll start with 5 people. But that will enable us to take our tests and straight away go and get for reimbursement codes, whilst we're dual tracking the FDA process at the same time. So that accelerates that process, but in addition, it generates direct revenue for the company, and we see it as a way as a demonstrator. So if you think about LabCorp or Quest or these great big reference labs, they want to sell tests where they know there's a market and they know it'll work and they can do large scale delivery. So if we've done some initial delivery and shown it works, and here's the patient interest, and we're starting to get reimbursement codes, then it's perfect for the bigger companies to pick up. So it's about seeding. It's basically about seeding the market.
And sorry, and just adding to that, and then the other component, as we said, is sort of to ring-fence that from our core R&D activities to support pharma services. That's the other component.
And when you pass these across, do you pass them and make the money on the device and the sample, a slide, or is it that you then charge them as well because you've got a service, a product ready developed?
Yes, so we get both. So if we're the clinical laboratory running the test, we get the full payment. If a hospital is running the test, they will get paid for the work they do to run it, and then they'll have to pay us to use the system. So we get, if we're running the test, we get all of it.
Yeah, and probably I'd add as well is that the pricing that you've seen in the past is research use pricing. That's not clinical use or commercial use pricing. For that, we'd seek to secure a higher level of payment.
And finally, can I follow on from what Mick has asked about Abbott? Can I have a rough feel for how much what you would charge, what you would expect for Abbott to have an exclusive in that one indication? Are we talking a couple of million up front or tens of millions up front?
Same thing. We can't answer that. We can't answer that, and that'd be premature at this stage.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not. It's not included in the numbers or the guidance. There's a process to go through, and it's hugely variable. It will depend on exactly what they want to include, because there could be an individual fish application to all fish applications. So
Let's put it this way: it's a large-scale opportunity. The market's worth $500 million at the moment, and that's with a Me Too product. Abbott's got the largest part of that market. They make about $250 to $300 per test. They're talking about a reimbursement code of maybe 10 times that. So their margins and our margins and the labs who run the test margins would all be very, very good. So it's very much in their interest. The other thing to do is to think about the dynamic of Abbott. Their business is focused on tissue analysis and cells. Now that business is getting damaged by molecular analysis, ctDNA, etc. The market is, they need something new, right? And we're offering it. We're offering a massive growth potential to their business.
Yeah, and as I said, there's huge variables. You know, there's them acting as the sales and distribution channel. So there's lots to go through to get to anything that would be concrete. So as I said, it'd be premature to try and just throw a number out there.
Okay, well, that looks like we've come to a natural conclusion on the questions. Thanks very much to all the analysts. Appreciate your attention and very good questions. And thanks very much to everybody listening in on the webcast. I hope you found it useful, and thanks very much for your support. We look forward to a very positive year going forward. Thank you.